Welcome back to Checkmate with Blake. Over the last few days and the last few weeks, I've had some requests to create a video that's designed more towards beginners, including beginners who are brand new to the game or those who understand the game and simply want to improve more. I would say that this video that I'm about to show you all applies to you if you're all the way up to 1600 ELO. So if you're below 1600 ELO, I think this video will be very helpful to you, which I think the majority of my viewers are. And what this is 11 principles that every player must know to improve their game. Moreover, as you'll see by here, I have a 93.3% accuracy. Before I get into it, what I did is I set up a game where I play white and I also am playing black, but what I'm doing is I'm having white implement the 11 principles and black not. Now, black still played a good game. It says they played like a 1700 ELO. We played like a 2500. So there's another point for you. We're going to show how to play a very simple game, how to implement these 11 principles and play like a 2500 ELO player. And even if you're 400 ELO, I think you'll be able to understand this. You'll be able to follow along, and we're going to break down each of these moves. So this game is designed to encompass all 11 principles that you have to know just to win more games. If you find this video helpful, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow a lot. Leave comments, leave likes. Let me know what you guys want to see next. We're going to get right into the video. So what we're going to start out by saying, first of all, let me cover all of the 11 principles we're going to talk about in this video, just so you all have an idea of what we're going to cover. We're going to teach you how to take the center and why you should take the center, how to develop your pieces, how to control the board, how to identify mistakes, how to attack, how to calculate, pawn structure and why it's important, how to avoid blunders, how to activate your king in the endgame, knowing when to break the rules, and how to defend chess position. So quite a lot of topics that we're going to cover in this video. And of course, we're going to go from start to finish, and we're going to cover each of these principles. So to start the game, we're going to talk about, your very first move, why you should take the center, and what does it mean to take the center. Taking the center, of course, means to take the center with a pawn. It means to control the board with this pawn. You're controlling these two squares with this pawn. So what is chess about? How do you win more games? You want to control the board. The more of the board you control, the more attacking chances you'll have, and the less attacking chances your opponent will have, which is why I say to take the center. Because when you take the center, you're controlling more of the board, and also you're putting pieces in controlling their side of the board, which is what you want to do. It's also going to create more space for you. As you'll see, if you take the center, you'll have more space, which means more opportunities to put your pieces in better squares. So of course, as I said, black is not going to follow these principles. They're playing the move e6. So of course, what do? What's the principle I just said? You take the center. You take the center again, because now you were just controlling these two squares, but now you're controlling these two as well, and you are fully controlling the center, whereas black is not even controlling the center. They're only controlling these two squares on their side of the board. So you're already at a better position. Now black says, okay, we need to take the center. We're not going to let them do that. So of course they go here. Now if you're an intermediate player, you may wonder, okay, maybe you'd consider a move like here. Maybe you would consider a move like this. But what we're going to show, just to show these principles and how easy it is to win at chess, how easy it is to understand this and improve your game. If you're in this position and you're a beginner, what you should do is just take more space. Play e5, as it says up here, claiming more central space by pushing the pawn. What you're doing by playing this move, and why we took the center and why it helps us, is because now you're restricting black's development. As we're getting into the second point, how to develop your pieces. The knights belong on these squares here. The bishops belong on these squares, or potentially even over here. Stuff like that. As you'll see in this move, by us pushing this pawn, black cannot develop their knight to where they want it to go. They would love to put the knight here. So instead, black decides they're going to put the knight on e7. Already, they've made a mistake. They're not controlling this. They're not controlling the board, and they're putting their pieces on squares they don't belong. So of course, it's not a big mistake. Again, if you're an intermediate, don't critique this too much, because of course you can justify this move. However, if you're just wanting to improve the game, what you play is you play this move, knight f3. As you can tell, it's the best move in the position, and all we did was just put our pieces where they belong. As I told you, they belong on these squares. Now black decides they're going to put their bishop here. Again, another mistake. They don't want their bishop in this position where it's such cramped. It's not viewing many squares. This kind of ties back to if they had controlled the center here, if they had pushed this pawn here, they would be able to put their bishop on a better square. But since they did not control the center, their position is cramped, and our position allows us to breathe, which allows us to put our bishop on this great square where we're going to be looking at this pawn down here in case black decides to castle. So that's just briefly how to develop your pieces. And here we go into another mistake that blacks made actually onto developing their pieces, because they put their knight on the rim, which leads us to another lesson, which is the knight on the rim is bad. This also ties back to developing pieces, so I didn't include this as a specific principle itself. But don't put your knight on the rim. And why is that? Because the knight on the rim only looks at these two squares on this side of the board. Whereas look at this knight. Or actually, let's just use our knight. It controls this pawn, protects this one as well, and also controls over here. So see how we're controlling 4 important squares. They're only controlling 2. So don't put your knights on the rim. In fact, we can further blunt their knight by actually playing this move c3. c3 now further restricts the movement of this knight. So black can no longer put this knight on any square that they would like to. In fact, this knight's not really doing much. As we go through this game, these moves I'm playing are I'm gonna explain my thought process behind this, so you can kind of follow why I'd play a move like c3, because we're restricting their knight. What else are we doing? We're actually improving our pawn structure. We have a nice pawn chain here, so a very strong pawn chain. And if you don't understand any of this stuff, just stick with me, because as this game progresses, I think you will see the importance of each one of these moves. Every move is very important. So now black decides they're going to play c6. They want to have a nice pawn structure too, but it's a mistake, because the problem is they're playing such a cramped position because they did not take the center. Every single principle will go right into each other. Okay, so we go ahead and continue. We go ahead and castle. Castling puts your king to safety, and it's a safe move. You know, we're kind of finishing our development. Castling is actually a form of development. So we're developing by bringing our rook to a better square and bringing our king to safety, where it's safe behind these nice 3 pawns, and this knight also is kind of defending a little bit of this position as well. Black plays the move queen b6, which brings us to another principle, and this is how to control the board. When you're looking at this position, especially as a beginner, you really may wonder what your move should be, right? Because maybe you want to develop this knight. Maybe you're thinking I should develop the bishop somewhere. Of course, if you develop the bishop, you'll hang this pawn. So you're having issues. You're thinking, there's issues, right? I want to bring my bishop out, but this pawn would fall. So how do you, what's the move you play in this position? Because there are a lot of options. Maybe you would even consider rook e1. But I'm going to give you a simple way to understand these positions and how to control the board. When the board is locked up like this, what you want to do is you want to try and attack on the flank. If you have a nice, strong, stable center, don't break your center open. Of course, there is an alternative to this too. If your opponent is attacking on the flank, then you want to attack on the center. That's just a very general principle that you want to understand. But what we're doing is we notice that this queen is somewhat misplaced. This queen is looking at this pawn. However, this queen could be deflected, right? Is there a way to move this queen away? There is. We need to push these pawns up the board and remove this queen from this square. By doing so, we're also going to be taking more space on the queen side. So we play the move a4. Of course, it says it's an inaccuracy, but this is just a principle I want you to understand. We need to control the position. We need to take control of this. Don't allow black to be looking at our pieces. Instead, we should move their pieces away when they do so. So black decides here they're going to castle, and immediately you should notice something feels wrong about this position, because we're starting to attack on the queen side, and because we're doing that, black should probably not castle into the side we're trying to attack. So this brings us into our next principle, which is how to identify mistakes. This move may not look like a huge mistake to you, but it is. It's a big mistake because black has an open queen side here. They've already moved this pawn in front of their king. They have a lot of these pieces that are just kind of thrown here, and we're already starting an attack. Now, it may be tempting to just throw in this move a5. However, after a5, you need to look at it and say, well, where will black go? Black will most likely just retreat the queen, and then you're not really doing much. Instead, what you need to do is identify a mistake. First of all, is identifying that this king has castled into a bad spot. And now we need to do is learn how to attack, which is going to bring us to our new principle, and we're going to show how to attack. How to attack is I want you to coordinate your pieces. The key word is coordination. Again, in chess, you want to control the board and you want to coordinate your pieces, and you will win the game if you do that every single time. So we're going to coordinate our pieces to kind of create an attack on this king side. But first, before we decide to do that, what we should do is throw in this move b4. The move, I didn't mean to do that actually. Yeah, b4. So after b4, what we're doing is we're threatening to kind of break open their pieces here, start attacking, throwing these pawns up the board to try and win. Now, why would you throw these pawns? Some people might say, well, maybe you're overextending. You're overextending your pawns by throwing them up the board. But you're not, because you're attacking their king side. What we're trying to do is open up files for this rook, things like that, to attack this king side. So again, we're trying to attack these pieces. We're going to use pawns on their side of the board and pieces on their side of the board. What we're also going to show here is after they play this move knight f5, further how to attack. I want you to, what did I say? We need to coordinate our pieces. So bring your queen to queen e2. This move actually covers a lot of principles in one. This move shows that the queen should be the supporting character. The queen supports this bishop in this attack, but is not leading the bishop. Because if the queen were here and the bishop were here, you could never take this knight because the pawn would take your queen. But since the bishop is in front, the bishop is able to look here, and you could potentially take it, right? Because obviously not in this exact position because the queen covers, the pawn covers as well, but the queen supports this piece. What you're doing is coordinating your pieces. The bishop and the queen do excellent together because they both can look at the same file, just like the queen and the rook, things like that. You want to have pieces coordinated. You know, two rooks, you know, if the rooks are stacked on top of each other like this, they're coordinated. They're very good pieces. So what we're doing is just coordinating our pieces here, and we're identifying weaknesses in their position too, which does bring us to the next principle, which is how to calculate. So in this position, as I said, of course you're looking at moves like, as I said, we're looking at this knight here. Is it possible that we could take it and force them to take back with the pawn to open up their king? Well, we can't, because if we take it right now, of course they can take back with the queen, and after we take, they're just going to trade down. We're not looking to trade down, we're looking to build an attack and coordinate our pieces. So how we calculate to determine if this attack is viable at the moment is just go ahead and try and look maybe 3 moves ahead. And how you do that is you identify weaknesses in the position. You use that to identify, to calculate. So the weaknesses, as I've been saying for a while now, is they have a very weak king side. And I know this because the pawn is pushed, and you know we have a lot of pieces that are starting to look down this way. That's how my first thing of how I identify weaknesses. So then if you want to calculate, you decide, how can I remove this queen from this square so that I can take this knight, and after they take back, take here with a check. That's how you calculate. You say, is there a way that I could remove one of these defenders of this knight so that I could take it? Well, your first instinct might to say, okay, let's just play a random move. Your first instinct might be, let's play this move, pawn a5, so we can just remove this queen from this defense. Well, although it's not incorrect, let's just say the move that they play here is queen c7. You might say, okay, well, we can take now, and here we are, we won this pawn, and that's correct. That would be an example of calculating well. However, I want you to look even deeper. Don't try to just win a pawn. Don't get greedy. Your goal in chess is to checkmate the king. It's to win the game. And by playing this move where you're just trying to get in here and do this quick attack, notice they can block here. They can actually block with their queen. And now you're going to either trade the queen down or go away. Okay, if you trade the queen down, yes, you're up a pawn, but you're only up a pawn. Versus, you know, if you go away, your attack is pretty much gone, right? I mean, you're still going to attack, but I'm just saying, we don't necessarily need to rush into making these big committal moves such as pushing the pawn at the board, because once a pawn is pushed up, it cannot go backwards. So instead, just build your attack. Continue coordinating your pieces. That's an example of how to calculate, but we're going to show how to calculate even better as we progress by building an attack. So let's go back here. Okay, so they play this move now, bishop e7, just trying to develop a piece. But what we notice here is that we can play this move bishop a3 because we've noticed that there may be a potential blunder on the board. It has not occurred just yet, but what you might notice is if we could push this pawn now, we would attack this knight and we would attack this bishop. Those are how you identify weaknesses in the position. You look at pieces that may be undefended. Now this piece is defended by the knight, but maybe we could remove the knight, and then after we play this move, we'd be attacking here and attacking here simultaneously. That's how you identify weaknesses. Find pieces that are not well coordinated on their position. So they go h6, and the move we play is b5. As we said, we're trying to attack both pieces. Now they trade down, and what we do is we just take back with the knight. Then they trade down this way, and we take back. Now you may be wondering if, like, a lot of trades just happened, why did we do the trades we do? So let's just slow down a little bit. Let's explain these moves that we did. So the reason, again, that we went b5 is we're trying to trade these pieces. We're trying to open the board because we want to get, first of all, we want our knight in a better square. We want our rooks over here. We want to attack this king, though, primarily. We're trying to open up the position, which is why we're threatening the knight and also threatening the pawn. Also threatening here. We're creating multiple threats. We're really making it complicated for our opponent. So they trade here. Why do we take this way versus taking here? Well, if we take here, it's not necessarily incorrect. It's not a horrible move. Of course, they're going to retreat the bishop, and it's not a big deal. Maybe we'll take here with check. But there's a better route, right? Because this is, just look at this position. This is one position we could have if we went down that line. However, since we take With the knight, what we're doing is developing a knight simultaneously. We're just bringing back those principles. What was the second principle we talked about? How to develop your pieces. Those principles don't go away. You want to just focus on the principles and you'll win more chess games. That's all we have to do is play the principles. We develop a piece. It's very simple. I'm trying to make it simple for everyone. So now they just, oh gosh, I went way back here. Let's go, sorry, way back. Okay, now here we are. They decide to take here because if they don't, their alternative would be maybe to move the knight. Of course, it does say it's the best move. Maybe now, though, we could consider just trading down or maybe bringing a rook in. But instead, black decided to take the knight or take the pawn. Just make it simple, right? They just want to get rid of our threat. We take back not with this way or here, but we take with the pawn because we're still attacking the knight. We're creating threats. We're putting a pawn on their side of the board and we're creating threats. Now when they go knight c7 to try and, contest this pawn and seem like maybe they're doing something, here's where we throw in another new principle. Well, not yet. Actually, I think it's one of the next moves. Sorry, we go rook b1. Let's just add more pieces to the party. We're trying to build an attack. We're coordinating our pieces. We're going back to that. We're trying to coordinate pieces and we're trying to identify some weaknesses here. They play this move f6, and here we do have another principle. Yeah, I do believe it's this next one. We're going to talk about pawn structure. I know earlier I talked about this pawn chain we had, but now we can actually identify another weakness in their position, which is if we take this pawn, their pawns will now be doubled. Doubled pawns are a weakness, and you will find it because when we go to the endgame, your pawns won't be able to move. You don't want to double your pawns. That's the whole thing. We want to keep our pawns in a nice pawn structure because if they're doubled, then they cannot move as well. So here we can go ahead and take this pawn, or take this knight, sorry, and after they take back, they have doubled pawns. Now, here you may be wondering, what is the move we play now? How do we continue this game? How do we continue our attack? Because it seems unclear. Again, it's very simple. We're trying to attack the king. Don't forget that. So now play this move c4. c4 is threatening to, if they capture here, we're going to develop a piece into a better square. They don't want to capture, but if they don't capture, we're going to continue pushing our pawns up the board and attacking the king. They don't capture back, and that's exactly what we do. We push the pawn up the board and we further attack the king. Now this queen has to move. It's being attacked by this pawn. After the queen moves, we further attack. We're just throwing the attack at them. Of course, this is not just without calculation. We're not just giving away pawns. You have to calculate the position. You just look at the weaknesses and you calculate the position. You say in this position, okay, well, what if they capture here? Well, we can take back because they cannot capture with the queen because our rook defends it. That's just all the calculation is. They do take here, and we take back with the pawn. Why do we take again with the pawn and not with the rook? You may wonder, because if you think, if I take with the rook, I'm attacking the queen. This is short-term thinking. Chess is a long game. It involves strategy that's deeper than just short-term attacks. So instead, we take with the pawn because after the knight moves, notice the king is really exposed, and this pawn is really controlling the board. Notice how our pawns throughout this whole game have really controlled the board. Now what we play is this move knight c2. Knight c2 looks strange, but you have to look at this position and you have to understand, what are we going to play here? It would be nice maybe to have some kind of check on this king, but if you give a check, the king's just going to move and there's no issue. Think deeper. Calculate stronger. So instead realize this knight, what is it? It's on the rim. Go back to the very second principle, how to develop your pieces. Our knights do not belong on the rim. They belong on active squares. Moreover, if we move the knight, you're actually activating this rook because this rook and this queen will now look at this knight. And you might say a rook is not worth a knight. However, you have to look deeper. You have to think about calculating tactics. There are tactics in this position, which you will soon see. There's brilliant moves coming. So we move the knight to look at this knight and potentially also move our knight to a better square, just applying simple principles. After they go bishop c6 to kind of try and hold their position, maybe stop checks, we give our first brilliant move of the game, and this is where we really talk about calculation. We sacrifice the rook. Notice it's a brilliant move. It's not showing up on the board here because I think I have that turned off, but instead you can see here it's a brilliant move. So why is it brilliant? As you're going to see, we've calculated this move. We looked at this position and we said, if we were to take this knight and they take back, well, what do we have? We take back with the queen, and it's a check. If the king decides to go here, what you'll notice is that we have a check here, and after the king's only move back, we have a checkmate. Feel free to slow down and really look at it if you want to. And you also notice the king cannot go here, right? Because the pawn covers. Likewise, if we take, here, I'll just show it. If we take, and take here with check, of course, they could go here. Still notice it's mate in 2. Where is that mate in 2? This depends on your calculation. But what we're going to do is I'm going to go over here and turn on the engine lines just to show you a quick mate here. We're going to go queen a7. King is going to go back to c8 because it cannot go forward. And then we have the same checkmate. So in the game, what actually happens is we take here, they take back, we give this check, and they decide to go this way, thinking that there's just an empty check here. But as you just saw, after this check and they go back, we simply have a checkmate here and we win the game. Now, I want to briefly go back a little bit, and I want to say, let me go back a little further. Yeah, so why is this a brilliant move, and why it does require deeper calculation than just simply, okay, I can take here and give this checkmate? Well, of course, after they take back, the best move is not actually to take with the queen. Because if we take with the queen, they can block here. You're still completely crushing. But I want you to calculate deeper, as I said. Instead, look at why we would sacrifice this piece. Is because we're actually opening up this square. We're opening up weaknesses on the king side, which is the whole entire goal. Instead, don't become so greedy and so fast. Instead, the second best move actually is to play this move knight b4. And the reason behind knight b4 is you may wonder and say, well, this doesn't make much sense. Okay, well, let's go down this line. Let's just say they go here, they're protecting their knight, they're attacking your queen. Now you give this check. Now this check comes in. After the king moves, you will simply have a checkmate here, as you can see with queen c7. And after they go here, this will be a checkmate. So again, I was just giving that example to really show how to calculate well. And now what we're going to talk about is one of the final things I wanted to talk about too. First of all, I wanted to cover also how to avoid blunders, which is, I guess, what we just talked about in this position. How you avoid blunders is you calculate well and you, again, identify weaknesses in their position. So what you want to do is make sure that they have no counterattack after this sacrifice. Is black threatening your queen? Are they threatening checkmate? If the answer is no, if they're not threatening your queen or threatening checkmate or threatening a lot of material, then there's really no significant weakness. So you're most likely going to be able to attempt your attack. However, to avoid a blunder, because the question is rook takes this a6, is it a blunder or is it a brilliant? In order to do that, you just have to ensure that your calculation is well. So your calculation has to be done correctly, or this move would have been a blunder. However, of course, in this position, we did calculate well. I showed how we were prepared if they took here and we took here and they went with the bishop. We weren't necessarily going to play that. We also had this move knight b4. Essentially, just a short way of saying it is just make sure your calculation is correct and make sure that there's no better attack they have on you. So it takes time to really try and find these brilliant moves. I could make a whole video entirely on how to avoid blunders, which we're not doing this one because this one's already long enough. But the last thing I wanted to cover is after this checkmate, let's say that we are trying to, what I want to show is how to activate your king in the endgame, because a lot of people don't understand this. A lot of people, and they get to an endgame, especially beginners, just don't know the moves to play. But what you need to know is, in an endgame, your king is actually your strongest piece, because your king can aid the pawn in getting to promotion. So what you need to know is, let's just go ahead and, I'm just going to go ahead and show as if, we sacrificed some pieces, they sacrificed some pieces, and we resulted in, let's see, where is it? Let's say we resulted in this endgame, which don't worry about how we got here. Let's just say this is the endgame you want to play. If you're playing white here, you really might not be sure how to play this endgame. Black's threatening to attack this pawn, and if you take back, they're still looking at this pawn. So what's the correct move? I want you all to just simply, I'm just not going to go spend a lot of time in here, but what I want you to know is you want to get this pawn, you get this king up the board all the way to protect this pawn or push this pawn up the board. So how you do that is after they go here, such as queen b7, all you have to do is really just activate your king. Of course, in this position, you may wonder, maybe a move like f4 is best to further solidify, and it actually is here. So, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time covering this position. If they were to go here, don't get too quick and get greedy. A simple move would actually be just to play the move g3. So rather than just trying to get your king now, because if you move your king now, of course, it's not necessarily horrible. You will get this king up here and win the game. It's actually a very strong move. A simpler move would be just play principal moves, keep your pawn structure, and then activate your king, run it up the board, and then just try and push this king away in order to promote this pawn. So again, I'm not going to cover this again. This could be a whole other video as well. So what I want you to understand in game is that your king is your most important piece. Do not forget to activate your king. activate your king. And what I mean by that is having it next to these pawns. Let's just play some random moves for a second. Just so I can illustrate it in case I'm not being super clear. Let's say that this pawn is the one we want to promote. If they give this check, don't just run away with your king and get scared. Run to the danger, because what you're doing is you're protecting, you're actually going to support this pawn. Because after you push this king here, you're attacking the rook, and after they move it, now your pawn will be pushed up the board and you will win the game. That's simply what I mean by it. The last thing I wanted to cover, which is something I did not get to cover in that exact game, is how to defend, because we were completely crushing, so there was no chance to really give an example. But how to defend, so let's just say that we're playing these moves here, and they actually throw in this, this bishop b4. A simple way to defend, this is just a simple way to explain this principle, is there is a threat right now of, they're pinning this pawn, pinning this knight to your king. A very simple answer would be, to let them take it and double your pawns. And as we said, though, we want to avoid doubled pawns. So this position isn't the greatest example, of course, because the move that I'm telling you all to play would be a move like bishop d2, but of course then it would hang this pawn. So instead, look at other options. Maybe you would consider a move like this, but the point is to minimize threats early. Their threat right now is, and what you have to identify, their threat is to take this knight and double your pawns. So identify their threats and just minimize them early. Don't wait. This pin might not look like a big deal, but what it is a slow control of your position. Because as that game you just saw, with all the principles we implemented, we just slowly gained control and dominated the position. And how did we do that? We created these threats slowly, and then we capitalized on them. So don't let black capitalize on your mistakes. Instead, use your pieces well and minimize threats early. So again, in this position, it's a little tricky, of course, because they're threatening this pawn, which is defended by the knight. Of course, we can just look down this position. There are some ideas we can play here. But a very simple one, if you're a beginner, might be a move like queen d3, although it's not the best move. Of course, it does say it's a book move, so it's not really a concern. Of course, they can still take here and double your pawns, but your queen, at least you're making the most out of the position. Your queen is in the center of the position. They have no pieces developed. You have pawns in the center. So sometimes, also with defending, you may not be able to always get exactly what you want, but make the most out of your situation. Make the most of the position. Like here, we're still winning by 0.8 despite us having doubled pawns, because we have made the most, we've activated our pieces, and we have pawns in the center of the board. The last thing I want to briefly talk about is knowing when to break the rules. So there are times that you have to know when to break these rules I've talked about, such as moving a piece multiple times in the opening. That's a common opening principle. You don't want to move a piece multiple times in the opening. So if we go back here, if they play a move like here, you don't want to be going knight here, because notice now you're actually losing already just by moving a piece twice. But there are times when you do want to move a piece multiple times in the opening. I'm not going to specifically go into it in this video simply because the video is already 20-something minutes at the moment. Another thing I want to talk about with knowing when to break the principles is, for example, let me see. Let me try and give a good way to show this. Actually, yeah, here we can do this. So there's a position like this that you sometimes find in certain things of the French defense example. So black might think they can take this queen and double our pawns. This is an example of where a doubled pawn's not a bad thing, because we don't necessarily want to take their queen here. If we take their queen, we do double their pawns, but what do? We activate their pieces, which goes back again to the second rule, how to develop your pieces. You want these rooks on open squares that can look down the board. And what have we done by taking this is we have opened up their rook. Their rook is now much better than it was before. So that's an example of maybe where you want to consider not following the doubled pawns rule, is if you're taking on the A pawns or the H pawns that open up the center, that open up these rooks. The very last thing that I want to talk about is there are specific openings where you don't take the center. So there's openings where your pawns, the whole goal of your pawn is not to take the center. If you're interested in learning about those openings, these are called modern openings. A lot of these are like hyper modern kind of theory. So if you want to learn about some new, more modern theory on how to win more games, like an opening where you do not take the center, I actually have a King's Indian Defense Masterclass video posted. I'm going to attach it to the screen above here, so you'll be able to press it and go watch that video if you're interested in it. If you're someone who wants to learn how to win games without taking the center, watch that opening video. If you found this video helpful, if you enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button. I know it's a very long video, but I really wanted to cover all these principles that will help you guys win more games. And especially, again, if you're a beginner, hopefully this video, has taught you something. Again, if you like it, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, leave some comments. Let me know what you guys would like to see next. And thank you all so much for watching.